Hello my beautiful friends, I hope your day is going well. So the Switch is doing pretty great. It's outpacing the Wii U by a country mile, Super Mario Odyssey is still melting everyone's faces, and Nintendo just had one doozy of a holiday season. But despite all the good tidings, there's still a problem lurking in the shadows. That problem is Amiibo, and it is the wilted lettuce in the overall delicious sandwich that is Switch era Nintendo. It's been quite a while since I've done a more critical video on Nintendo, and oh boy, you better get ready for this. I'm gonna tell you what I really think about Nintendo. I'm a really, okay, no, I'm just kidding. They're not like eating puppies or anything, but I do want to talk about how this whole Amiibo situation negatively affects us fans and how the company's missing out on something big. A few years ago, Toys to Life was huge. Inspired by the success of Skylanders and Disney Infinity, Nintendo announced their own line of NFC chip-equipped figures. The genius here was that the tech would be built right into the greater Nintendo ecosystem, and figures would be designed to work across a range of Nintendo titles. The market was already getting kinda flooded, but Nintendo was ensuring that they could come at the Toys to Life concept from a slightly different angle and potentially turn it into something much bigger, especially considering their figures could store data, opening up even more possibilities. The new Smash Bros. Launched with a pretty cool little feature where scanning an amiibo gave you a little CPU partner of that character that you could fight with and train. This was really promising, and the sort of thing I would have gone crazy for as a kid. After that, we started getting games where amiibo only scored you costumes and stuff, and this was a little fun, but I for one was waiting for the next big thing. Namely, Nintendo's big amiibo game. Because the possibilities have always been staggering. You know the Subspace Emissary mode in Smash Bros. Brawl, where all of Nintendo's characters come together in one gigantic epic crossover and it's really awesome? It sounds like opinions are mixed on like the gameplay, but that concept, all the cutscenes, it's pure joy to see all those characters interacting. Now imagine that idea as an entire series, and instead of just a story mode for Smash Bros., it's a big adventure game where, hey, look at that, you scan your Link amiibo to get Link, you scan your Kirby amiibo to get Kirby. Back when amiibo first launched, not only was this something I wanted dearly, but it felt like the next logical step. It felt to me like, well, they made a line of Toys to Life figures. Obviously, they're working on the big game to really bring them to life. But, as you probably know, that did not happen. For a while, I entirely assumed that it wasn't happening because the Wii U wasn't working out so well, and they just had to be working on such a thing for the Switch. In fact, when we first heard about the NX, I wanted to make a video talking about how this hypothetical amiibo adventure game positively had to be a launch title, and I just never got around to it. I'm sure the idea is still in my notes somewhere. Oh, yep, there it is. And see, even then, the clock was kinda ticking for Nintendo. Skylanders had obviously already seen its peak, Disney Infinity wasn't far from being put to rest, and a third big Toys to Life franchise in the form of LEGO Dimensions was already hitting the scene. With each and every newcomer, and with each passing year, Nintendo was missing out on the craze. Kids' rooms were filling up, parents' wallets were emptying, and it felt like there would come a time when everyone just threw up their hands and went, "That's enough toys! I got Spyro, and Elsa, and Gandalf, this party's too full for Mario 2. Alas, the launch of the Switch has come and gone, and amiibo have been on the scene for years, and there's still no great big amiibo game. Right now, the most intriguing thing to be done with amiibo is still the Smash Bros. Thing, the very first thing. And the closest they've come to making a game that's quote-unquote powered by amiibo is Animal Crossing Amiibo Festival, which, let's just say, didn't get us particularly excited to rush out and buy a bunch of figures. And I don't know exactly when it happened, but now my own conclusion is that amiibo adventure is just not happening. You never know what will happen with future consoles, things can change very quickly in just a few years, but I don't think Nintendo has any immediate plans to make that kind of game for Switch. Reasons? First off, and most obviously, they would have done it already. They would have made it happen at the height of the whole Toys to Life craze. Why would they wait until it was basically over to get started on something like that? Even if it was to avoid competition, I still feel like they would have at least revealed it by now. I once thought costumes and item drops were fun little placeholders to keep us picking up figures until the real uses for amiibo were revealed to us, but it seems like this is all Nintendo ever had planned. Secondly, there's a compatibility issue. The draw of the other Toys to Life platforms is that if you buy the toy, you get the character in the game. No questions asked. There are no Skylanders or Disney or LEGO figures that don't translate into their respective games. Early on, Nintendo might have been able to make that happen, but now, There are so many Amiibo figures. What is it, a Skillion by now, I think? Yeah, something like a Skillion Amiibo last time I checked. It's pretty unlikely that they'll be willing, or maybe even able, to make a game with that many unique characters. That's the sort of thing you've got to build up over a number of years and content expansions. They could release a line of Amiibo that specifically work with their big crossover game, and in fact, that's probably what they'll do if they ever do make one, but that's not exactly the most desirable option because it leaves the other Skillion Amiibo and their owners behind. There's one more reason though, and it's the biggest one of all. Let me really clarify here that this is just my theory. You never really know what's going on at Nintendo, and for all I know, they're gonna announce Amiibo Adventure at E3 and it's gonna be everything I ever wanted. But the way I see it, they're not planning on making such a game because they're too comfortable with what they've got now. Right now, whenever a new Amiibo or line of Amiibo is released, they all get snatched up by the collectors and Nintendo makes a cool chunk of change. Amiibo are just plain neat. They're all awesomely designed and Nintendo's never had such a huge line of toys spanning all their different franchises. Even completely separated from their in-game functionality, there are just that many people out there that want the figures on their shelves. So the way I see it, Nintendo's kind of stuck in an interesting situation. At any given time, they could get started on that Amiibo adventure, or whatever it would end up being, and try to build up the platform as a whole. Maybe put out more stock of the older figures, invest money into making it all bigger, or they could just invest a tiny bit of money into making more figures that they know will sell out instantly. The latter choice is obviously a lot simpler, a lot easier, and a safer moneymaker in the short term. What if they spent $10 million on a big Amiibo game and it didn't significantly boost Amiibo sales or sell a lot of copies? They've put out so many figures, so which one should they try to keep on store shelves? They can't possibly represent enough of their characters. Trying to really establish their platform versus putting out a steady stream of figures in small batches is the difference between trying to sell 10 figures to 10 million people each and trying to sell 100 figures to 1 million people each. Those both make the same amount of money, but the latter one takes much less work. They've already got that 1 million people in their pocket. They don't have to work to bring in others. They just have to keep selling an endless stream of figures to that 1 million. That's why they're just kind of like, yeah, let's just keep doing what we're doing for now. With this model, the money is easy, it's consistent, and the whole thing is significantly simpler than the software business they've been in for years. I mean, they're probably on cloud 9 with this. Shigeru Miyamoto spends so much time figuring out all these little finer details and designing new games that it's probably great to just dump some colored plastic in an injection mold and watch people buy it, because they love the characters and the end product is really well designed. On the surface, it appears to be win-win. I really can't blame them for wanting to keep this process going. The hype surrounding new figures is pretty good publicity for the new games, the investors are happy, and collectors don't look like they'll lose interest anytime soon. The problem is that this is not win-win. There are many drawbacks to this system, and the average consumers are the ones that end up getting the short end of the stick. The most obvious issue that anyone will give you an earful about is availability. By releasing so many figures in such small batches and failing to consistently restock old ones, Nintendo has created a sales economy that invites scalpers and leaves most fans out in the cold. Basically, since the very beginning, we've lived with this truth, that when new Amiibo hit the shelves, they ain't gonna be there long. There are some plainer characters and designs that stick around, and very rarely we'll see random restocks where all of a sudden there are rare Amiibo everywhere, until they're snatched up, of course. But the vast majority of the time when Nintendo announces a cool new Amiibo, the general consensus seems to be, wow, that would be cool if there was any chance I could get my hands on one. I mean, for real, this is a regular occurrence. It's basically all anyone talks about with each announcement. The reveal of a fantastic new figure should bring nothing but happiness. We should all get excited because, whoa, this is a great new product, and I want this product. But that's just not the way it is. Sometimes I see more negative reactions than good ones, because the cooler an Amiibo is, the more upset people are that they've got such a slim chance to score one of their own. And I really don't think that's healthy for a brand. That doesn't create a very friendly public image. It's pretty obvious that Nintendo is selling themselves short here. I mean, imagine you're a kid. You've got a tiny bit of disposable income. You don't really use the internet a lot, at least not for like shopping. You're definitely not the type to camp a website in order to grab a product the second it goes up for pre-order. You're a casual customer, basically. But you love Nintendo. You love Zelda and Smash Brothers and all those big games, and you want to get in on this whole Amiibo thing. Say you even like the dumb little fun stuff they do. You want to drive around in Mario Kart dressed as Luigi. You want to get those special statues in Hey Pikmin, so you get your mom to drive you to the store, and you find this. This is footage from my local Best Buy, Walmart, and Target. And what do we got? Waluigi, Daisy, Animal Crossing and Fire Emblem leftovers, and that's just about it. None of those squishy Metroids, no Breath of the Wild Guardians, none of the other 95% of Smash Brothers characters who got figures. And this is messed up, my friends. I don't know if this is a retailer thing or a Nintendo thing or both, but this is very sad, especially if you're the kid I'm talking about, looking to buy some cool characters to use in your favorite Nintendo games. You know what this communicates to me? This says, why are we even selling these? Why do these have their own section? What's the point? If the best amiibo don't even hit the shelves before people come and snatch them up the day they ship to the store, why are there shelves? The biggest sin, though, in my opinion, isn't that they've created an environment where it's frustratingly difficult to get the figures you want, but that they're squandering such a huge opportunity to be something bigger. I know LEGO Dimensions is on its way out, but when I walk by the display, there's still a little part of me that wonders what it would be like to get into the game. I imagine picking up the starter pack, I think about all the cool characters I like. I could get Gimli and Bart Simpson? Oh my gosh, I can be Voldemort. I won't do it because I'm a crummy old adult with no time and, like I said, they're on their way out. But the idea is still exciting. Sometimes the displays still grab me, and if I were a kid, I would be all over it. But walking by this is just lame. It's doing nothing to grab my attention. It's like it doesn't want to attract new customers. And even if someone does find themselves interested by what they see on display, what happens when they find out that there's no base game to use them with and that they're really just looking at costumes? Nintendo has such a rich history of games and characters that Amiibo could be big. Activision used Spyro as a launching point, but largely had to invent their own world, and both Disney Infinity and LEGO Dimensions used popular characters, but required a lot of cooperation between different licensees and hardware manufacturers, and they all launched on multiple consoles. But look at Nintendo. They've got the tools to do it all themselves. Nearly all of their first-party software is developed in-house, they own every IP they would ever need, and their consoles have the NFC tech built in. Beyond the actual manufacturing of the figures themselves, it's all them, and they could build up a platform so much bigger than any of the other Toys to Life franchises. Amiibo are already integrated into just about every title they produce at this point, but if they took it further, namely by creating a big game that uses the figures to a great extent, they could have something that sticks around long after the other Toys to Life games and figures are relics of the past. Even more, right now they're selling Amiibo to Nintendo fans. You buy the games, you like the characters, you buy the Amiibo. But imagine if it went the other way. Imagine seeing these characters in the store, thinking the Amiibo adventure game looks fun in the same way that people were so attracted to Skylanders in the first place. It just seemed like a cool thing, so they got into it. Looking at those Nintendo guys up on that shelf, suddenly the Switch seems like a pretty cool system to have. And even say you've got a Switch already, and for years you've been only into Mario games. But playing Amiibo Adventure gets you looking at all sorts of other characters and series, and soon you find yourself wanting to try them out. Smash Bros. Has always been good at exposing people to franchises they might not be familiar with, but a full adventure game where you really get to see what these other games are about, with a line of awesome toys to go along with it, would accomplish the same thing to the nth degree. It would be this ecosystem where the games sell the Amiibo and the Amiibo sell the games, and it all supports and perpetuates itself. And now with Nintendo focusing nearly all its efforts on one single unified console, the simplicity of getting in on that ecosystem would be very enticing for customers. As someone who's interested in the industry, I want to see Nintendo live up to their potential, but I also can't ignore my feelings as a fan, and as a fan, I just want more to do with these Amiibo. I want more of a reason to buy them. This right here is my Amiibo collection. I scanned the Zelda ones a few times to get some armor drops and mess around with Wolf, Link, and Breath of the Wild. I got myself a few Mii costumes in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe that I'll never use, and I scanned Samus into Amiibo Tap Nintendo's Greatest Bits, which you might remember from the video I did, and I got a little demo of the original Zelda, which I never saw a reason to return to. And that's it. That's all I've done with my Amiibo, because to be honest, I didn't buy/happily receive any of these because of what they did in a game. Not one of them. I've even got Samus Returns, but I don't have the NFC scanner for my old 3DS, so I can't even use the Metroid ones. Each of these is sitting on my shelf because they're cool to look at, end of story. And I get the feeling that just about everyone feels the same way, at least from what I hear. People collect them because they're cool to collect, not because they do anything, because they just don't do much. Much like the state of the Amiibo displays at my local retailers, this is messed up. I shouldn't feel so indifferent toward the functionality of these things. I should feel like they offer a great value both because of how they look and how they function. Otherwise, they should have always just been figures and nothing more. And if anything, the fact that they're selling so well, despite not really doing much, is evidence that the platform could be so much bigger if Nintendo gave it a bigger shot. They've already got so many people buying purely based on looks. How many would they sell if these things unlocked characters in an awesome game as well? Now, while we're on the subject of doing more, it's important to outline what it is I would want from Amiibo if Nintendo were willing to expand. People are growing pretty wary of the idea of too much content being locked behind Amiibo. Twilight Princess HD featured an entire mini dungeon similar to the Cave of Ordeals called the Cave of Shadows, and you can only unlock it with the Wolf Link Amiibo. This was made a little better by the fact that physical copies of the game were all bundled with Wolf Link, but we all knew we were paying extra for that Amiibo, so some found it a little irksome. Then more recently, Samus Returns came onto the scene with a third difficulty setting locked behind the Metroid Amiibo. This, I think, was significantly more upsetting to the general populace. The game does already have a hard mode, but it seems that people are starting to see this as a potential slippery slope. I personally wasn't too upset about the fusion mode thing, mostly because of the inclusion of that regular hard mode that doesn't require an amiibo, but I do completely understand that wariness. I also don't want too much to be locked behind these things because I don't want to be forced to buy 1 or 2 amiibo in order to get the full experience out of every game I buy. The way I see it, the best way to use an amiibo in a game is to have it unlock content that's exclusive to the character. That's exactly why a big amiibo adventure game where scanning Samus lets you play as Samus and scanning Wario lets you play as Wario is the best thing to do. Don't get me wrong, this is definitely a form of, quote, on-disc DLC. All Toys to Life games are about on-disc DLC, and if that's not something you can get behind, I understand. But the whole thing is all about fun. It's about the magic of having a physical toy that comes to life in your game. Yeah, all these games could just give you the characters, they're all right there in the code, and it's pretty darn convenient how profitable this formula happens to be, but it's just the way Toys to Life works. It's what makes it really profitable, sure, but it's also what makes it different and what attracts so many kids. Once again, I would have gone crazy for this stuff as a kid. Since coming to life is the whole draw of Toys to Life, that's why having a toy unlock a dungeon or a difficulty setting is a little hard to swallow. Nothing about that is coming to life. It's just plain old holding back content unless you buy the toy. I cited Smash Brothers as featuring the best use of Amiibo so far, and it's because of that magic feeling of grabbing your favorite character off the shelf, slapping it onto your gamepad, and watching as it appears in your game, where you can personalize it and play with it and even store its data back in its Amiibo so you can take it over to a friend's house and play with it on their game. Wolf Link in Breath of the Wild is another great example. Having him around in the game doesn't really accomplish a lot, he's just not incredibly useful, at least not when you're a decent amount of the way through the game, but the feature is just fun. It's just a little bit of magic. It's just some nifty little thing you can do with your Wolf Link Amiibo. It's a way to put him directly into the game, and I personally never heard anyone complain about not having access to the feature without the Amiibo, because when Toys to Life is done right, it feels right. It just makes sense that, oh yeah, of course you can only get Wolf Link to chill with you if you have the figure. And this is important because this idea is how Nintendo can continue to have their Amiibo work across a range of different titles, which indeed is a very big draw. It's that in-house legacy IP ecosystem thing. It's what sets Amiibo apart from other Toys to Life platforms. Even if they release some big Amiibo adventure, they need to focus on making other unlockable content more like Smash CPU Buddies and Wolf Link. And kinda like Animal Crossing Amiibo Festival, just with, fun gameplay to back it up. And you know what? They can still include all the costumes and daily item drops and such. That's all still fun. Like I said, I didn't do it for long, but I did enjoy gathering up all my Zelda guys once a day and seeing what goodies they earned me. We just need more of the bigger stuff to further justify purchasing these neat little figures, and of course the platform as a whole needs to be more attractive to new potential customers. So, since I don't like to criticize something without offering tangible alternatives, what's my plan of action? If Arlo were put in charge of Nintendo tomorrow, no questions asked, what would he do? Well, to be honest, if that happened, I'd have some other major stuff to do before I visited the Amiibo offices. You can probably guess what most of it would be. But once I got around to it, what would the plan be? Well, most obviously, it would be to get an Amiibo adventure game moving as quickly as possible. Of course, it can't be too much of a rush job, though. I wouldn't press the team to just churn out your average brawler platformer. We're talking about a company filled with genius game designers here. They would need the creative freedom to give the genre that Nintendo twist. And yeah, assuming they were starting at square one, it would be a few years before the game came out, but I say better late than never. They've already missed the Toys to Life craze at its high point, so a few years aren't going to make a big difference, especially because a true Nintendo-themed Toys to Life game is always going to attract people because of that very passionate Nintendo fanbase and the strength of the company's legacy IPs. Beyond that, there was once a time when I would have said, stop making so many Amiibo, let us catch up, slow down. But obviously we're well past that point. As I said earlier, there are already so many Amiibo out there that it would be pretty difficult to incorporate all of them into one game. Releasing a new line of figures for the new game would indeed work if that was the only option. However, if the team decided that it was worth trying, there are a few things they could do to ease both the workload and, from the perspective of the customer, the overwhelming nature of having so many figures to choose from. First, you could stack up alternate versions of a character all into one character. For instance, it doesn't matter if it's Smash Series Mario or Mario Series Mario or Wedding Suit Mario. Scanning Mario into the game lets you play as Mario. Maybe they could toy with alternate weapon or costume sets based on the specific amiibo, but it wouldn't be required by any means. Then if they were able to create other uses for characters other than fighting, that would help them incorporate characters that aren't exactly known for smashing baddies. I know that the villager from Animal Crossing was turned into a fighter for Smash Brothers, but I feel like it would be a harder sell for, well, these other guys. What if all Amiibo were given something like a classification, fighter or support, something like that? In the game, you've got some sort of home base or a town. Maybe the support characters hang around and gather resources or help you in other ways. I mean, even just populating your town with the characters would be fun as heck, even if it didn't have like a ton of functionality. Or maybe if this is a co-op game, support characters act as healers. That way you could make just about all the Animal Crossing characters come out as more or less the same character, but with a different skin. KK Slider, for the record, absolutely gets his own moveset. But these other guys don't have a lot of unique qualities, at least not ones that translate very well into different battle strategies. I mean, they're from Animal Crossing, for Pete's sake. Heck, have a few different support types to choose from and stick any fitting amiibo into one of those categories. You've already got Inklings as fighters, and they can obviously change into a squid at will in the game, so the plain old Inkling squid amiibo can be support. The Pikmin without Olimar can either be support character or just give you Olimar with Pikmin. Either way, there are so many ways you could do it. So many ways you could kind of whittle down this vast collection of figures and make it more manageable. Then you've got sword-wielding characters, and these can be streamlined in the same way that the first few Fire Emblem characters to hit Smash were slightly differing clones of Roy. They don't have to be carbon copies, that would be boring, but they can use a lot of the same moves and animations. They can function similarly to help speed things along. This isn't all a perfect solution, and it would still take a lot of thought and a lot of work, but they just might be able to pull it off, to fit basically every amiibo into the game so that no matter what figure you've already got, you can bring it to life in some form or another. So then the big question is, how do you communicate all this to the average consumer when it's not displayed that way on the current packaging? How do they know how to use all these characters in the new game? Right now, all the boxes talk about Smash Brothers or Mario Party or whatever, but people might not know how the whole thing works with the Amiibo Adventure game. Well, that leads into the next part of my plan. Outdated packaging doesn't matter too much because there are barely any amiibo on store shelves anyway. The next step would be to get the presses moving again, start pumping out more stock. It would be a great undertaking considering how many amiibo there are, but if we're building up the platform here, we're going to need all the figures those molds can pop out. This is amiibo moving out of collector's item territory and into full-on toy territory, where it always should have been. And every new printing or pressing or whatever you call it will come with new second edition packaging, pointing everyone toward the Amiibo Adventure game, letting them know what they'll get when they scan their figure. Okay, Arlo, but how do you fit a Skillion amiibo on store shelves? The answer is, you don't. You fill the stores with key characters, your Marios and Links and Pikachus, the high-volume stuff that's going to entice newcomers. Throw in a few shelves of whatever the newest amiibo is, too. Shortages are a thing of the past, after all, so this will get people coming back to the store for new stuff instead of, camping and pre-ordering and stuff. For the majority of the amiibo catalog, though, you set up an online store. Putting together a big distribution center and selling amiibo through Nintendo.com or something would work, but I'd much prefer striking a deal with Amazon. I get it, Nintendo and Amazon have this weird thing, they're kind of like mad at each other or something, I don't exactly know, but under President Arlo's rule, they get over it. Every old amiibo gets a bunch of new stock and it all goes to Amazon's warehouses. When a new person gets into the amiibo ecosystem and wants to buy their favorite character, they go and buy that character, and for MSRP, not from a scalper. And when Amazon runs out of stock of that character, well, hot dog, people are buying that character. Make more of that character and get it to the Amazon warehouses. What a novel concept. After all this, what do you have? You have a product that was desirable made several times more desirable. You have customers who want to buy that product. You have a company that sells that product to those customers in whatever quantity demand will allow. And most importantly, you have fans who are not just one and done slapping money on the table, but are investing in a product ecosystem, which leads to both long-term satisfaction for them and long-term profits for the company. So that, my friends, is what I would do to improve this whole Amiibo situation. Yes, it's risky, or at least riskier than what Nintendo's doing now, which is basically zero risk. It would take time and money, and if it failed, Nintendo would have a whole lot of plastic toys they didn't know what to do with. But here's the thing. The Switch is selling at a really good rate, but the number is still relatively low this early in its life. The 3DS sold well, but not every model came with an NFC reader. And despite all this, despite there being a somewhat relatively low number of people who have the ability to scan an Amiibo into a game, and despite there not being a lot of good reasons to scan an Amiibo into a game, Amiibo still sell amazingly. The cool ones are still next to impossible to get at a decent price. Nintendo is still making a killing, releasing wave after wave of new ones. So how will things look a few years from now when the Switch has sold a Skillion units and the number of NFC reader wielding customers hungry to get their hands on their favorite figures is several times higher than it's ever been? At that point, continuing to neglect the software side of Amiibo and continuing to put out small batches in order to turn a quick profit makes no sense. At that point, if Amiibo hasn't been built into something big, then Nintendo is missing out on truckloads of cash, and we're still lacking reasons to take those poor little plastic guys down from our shelves. This could potentially be one of the most lucrative things Nintendo has ever done. They just need to stop dipping their toe in the water and make the plunge already. Also, make more squishy ones. I like the squishy ones. Well, thanks for watching, folks. I'll catch you on the next video, and in the meantime, my Amiibo collection needs dusting again. Why are they so dusty? I mean, really, honestly, I'm really wondering. I dusted them this morning. This has nothing to do with how infrequently I use them. I honestly don't know where all this dust is coming from.